Hi, I'm Karen with the Gaithersburg Community Museum, and welcome to our first virtual Storytime station. We're delighted to welcome Dean Robbins. Dean joins us all the way from Madison, Wisconsin to read his book, Miss Paul and the President. Dean's written many books for young readers. He likes to explore the lives and accomplishments of real life heroes. Welcome, Dean.
Hi everybody, I'm Dean Robbins. Welcome to this program from the Gaithersburg Community Museum. I'm excited to read Miss Paul and the President for you and to honor an amazing woman named Alice Paul on the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote throughout the United States. In Alice's day, it looked like the law was never going to allow women to vote. Believe it or not, many people back then were really against the idea of women voting, including the President of the United States, a man named Woodrow Wilson. But Alice Paul came along with loads of creative ideas for changing people's minds, plus a tremendous amount of energy and courage. How did she and her friends do something that seemed impossible 100 years ago? How did they get President Wilson on their side when it looked like he would never support women's right to vote? Well, let's read Miss Paul and the President and find out how it all happened. Miss Paul and the President, the creative campaign for women's right to vote. Alice Paul hurried up and down Pennsylvania Avenue in a purple hat. She wanted to make everything perfect for her parade. A parade no one in Washington, D.C. would ever forget. Alice double-checked the 26 floats, and the 10 bands, and the dozens of dancers. She took her place with 8,000 other women. They wore colorful sashes and carried brightly painted signs. Alice held onto her hat so it wouldn't blow off in the wind. She led the women up Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. People lined the sidewalks to see the hullabaloo. Some of them cheered, but many jeered. No to votes for women, they called. Alice expected the jeers. Women couldn't vote in the United States, and most Americans didn't think they should. She hoped her parade would help to change their minds. A mile away, Woodrow Wilson rode a train into Washington, D.C. The new President of the United States adjusted his spectacles. His daughter, Margaret, straightened his top hat. "Thousands of people will be here to meet you," she said. "You should look your best." President Wilson stepped off the train and waved. But no one waved back. The station was almost empty. The whole city had gone to see Alice Paul's parade instead. Who was the determined young woman in the purple hat? Alice Paul grew up on a farm. She liked to make mischief right alongside the boys in her town. They snuck candy and chased chickens and threw mud balls. Every 2 years, Alice watched her father go off to vote. Her mother had to stay at home. Why should it be that way? Alice read about her country's laws. The Constitution promised that people could elect their own leaders, but it also said that only men could vote. Weren't women people too? Shouldn't they be able to vote as citizens of the United States of America? Alice found books on women's suffrage. She learned that suffrage meant the right to vote. Suffragists wanted to change the Constitution so women could help elect their own leaders, just as men did. They needed to convince the President and Congress, but the politicians in Washington, D.C. wouldn't listen. Oh, Alice had lots of ideas for making them listen. When she was old enough, she joined the other suffragists who demanded the right to vote. She impressed these women with her big parade on Pennsylvania Avenue. She impressed them even more when she set up a meeting with President Woodrow Wilson himself. President Wilson wanted to see the woman who had caused the hullabaloo. He thought she might apologize to him. After all, she had stolen the spotlight on his first day in Washington, D.C. Alice did not plan to apologize. She sat down in the president's office and looked him right in the eye. "Mr. President, will you support the vote for women?" she asked. The president did not expect so bold a question from this small woman in a purple hat. "Miss Paul, the time is not right. I have many more important problems to worry about." President Wilson got to work on his problems. Alice got to work too. She opened an office in Washington, D.C. for a new group called the National Woman's Party. Thousands of women joined. They called Alice their dear little leader. The dear little leader wanted to show the president that women's rights were as important as anything else in the United States. She would do it by making mischief, just as she had on the farm. Margaret Wilson stared out the White House window. "Father, come look." Alice led a fleet of fancy cars up Pennsylvania Avenue. Women honked their horns and waved their yellow flags. Congress came out of the Capitol to find a long scroll unfurled on the marble steps. "Support the vote for women." A funny-looking train chugged from the East Coast to the West Coast. Alice had named it the Suffrage Special. The train stopped in towns along the way, and families came out to gawk at it. Women made speeches from the caboose. "Send a letter to the president. Tell him to support women's right to vote." President Wilson got bags of letters from all around the country. They piled up to the ceiling in his office. But the president had other problems to worry about. He didn't take time to read the letters about women's suffrage. So Margaret read them instead. That winter, Margaret sat next to her father in the president's car. A strange sight greeted them at the White House gate. Women strode back and forth carrying signs. President Wilson spotted Alice at the front of the group. She looked him right in the eye. The president glanced down at his newspaper, but Margaret waved at Alice through the window. Alice and her friends paced in front of the White House day after day in the freezing cold. People lined the sidewalks to see the hullabaloo. Some of them jeered, but many cheered. They brought scarves and mittens to keep the women warm. The police ordered Alice to leave the White House grounds. "Not until the president supports women's right to vote," she declared. The police put the women in handcuffs and took them off to jail, just as Alice hoped they would. President Wilson did not like the thought of Alice in jail. He knew she loved the United States. Why else would she go to all this trouble to vote in her country's elections? "Maybe women's suffrage is more important than I thought," he said. Margaret looked her father right in the eye, just the way Alice Paul had. "Yes to the vote for women," she said. The president would make a speech, an important speech. Alice stood with others from the National Woman's Party. She wondered what the president would say. Woodrow Wilson adjusted his spectacles. Margaret straightened his tie. "People all over the country will read about your speech," she said. "You should look your best." The president faced the crowd. "The time is right. I will ask Congress to pass a law giving all women the vote." The women waved yellow handkerchiefs and threw yellow flowers. "3 cheers for President Wilson," they shouted, "and 3 cheers for Alice Paul." 2 years later, Alice skipped down Pennsylvania Avenue to vote in the 1920 election. She filled out her ballot and raised her arm in victory. So, that's the story of Miss Paul and the President. Now you might understand the second part of the book's title, which is The Creative Campaign for Women's Right to Vote. Alice Paul had to do more than just make speeches about voting. To change people's minds, she had to be creative about it, planning parades and petitions and letter-writing campaigns and even protests in front of the White House. Her creative approach helped change the law, and women's votes over the last 100 years have helped change our country. So thank you for listening, and I hope Alice Paul will inspire your life as much as she's inspired mine. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dean, for joining us to read Miss Paul and the President. This is one of several programs we've planned to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. On Thursday at 7 o'clock, we'll be joined by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, as portrayed by Dr. Melinda Grube. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was one of the founders of the suffrage movement, and she will recount what happened in those early years. Then next month, we'll be visited by Mary Church Terrell, as portrayed by actor Shari Tolliver, on October 22nd. Mary Church Terrell will be interviewed by local high school student Joy Allen, and she'll talk about the role of Black women in pushing for the vote, as well as her work for women's rights and the civil rights movement. And then on the 27th, Storytime Station will host author Mara Rockcliffe. Mara will read her book, Around America to Win the Vote, Two Suffragists, a Kitten, and 10,000 Miles, about the journey of Nell Richardson and Alice Burke in 1916 to spread the message Votes for Women. We have a special Storytime giveaway. Mara has offered copies of her book, and we will be making a special Facebook event for the giveaway. Email the museum or reply in the comments why you think it's important to vote, and you'll be entered to win. Contest will run from today through October 19th. I can't wait to read your entries.